So my research in econometrics has kind of different strands. There's a rather theoretical and methodological strand, which probably is not so interesting to a wider audience. And then there's a more applied strand that comes out of my interest in empirical industrial organization and competition economics. And that in turn is linked to my now more than a decade-long engagement with various antitrust authorities in the UK and abroad. And one of my current areas of interest is in empirical industrial organization, where I look jointly with a colleague at Oxford and another colleague at Johns Hopkins University in the United States at firm-to-firm bargaining in bilateral negotiations where prices can be differentiated as an outcome of bilateral bargaining between the bargaining parties. And that is an area that has been looked at from the theoretical perspective in great detail, but empirically has not been analyzed much due to a lack of data. But because of my association with various competition inquiries that looked at inter-firm relationships, I was fortunate enough to gain access to an interesting data set in which upstream manufacturers negotiate with downstream firms that are large firms who have market powers themselves, just as the manufacturers do. And so this sort of setting gives rise to inter-firm bargaining. And so we look at that in the context of this data set. That is a research agenda that is of interest to both economic consultancies and antitrust authorities. I'm going to present this in a few weeks' time at the Competition and Markets Authority here in London, and it has been already presented at the Department of Justice, the Antitrust Division in the United States. I'm also interested in healthcare markets, and there also from a competition angle, I'm interested in competition between hospitals. That has become a topic in the UK, and not just in the UK, since various governments have realized that the healthcare sector would benefit from infusing competition into the sector, both in order to bring the costs down and in order to enhance quality. And so I've already in the past worked on models that look at how patients choose hospitals for elective medical procedures, and what attributes on the part of the hospitals do they take into account when they make their choices. And one feature of that analysis that to my mind was not sufficiently taken into account is the fact that often when patients make such decisions, they don't do this in isolation, but they are advised by a third-party expert, a general practitioner, a doctor, a physician. And the issue that arises from this interference of an outside party is that the incentives of the advisor may not be perfectly aligned with the incentives of the beneficiary of the decision outcome, for instance, the patient. And so I'm interested in looking at how this, let's call it choice in the presence of an expert, needs to be modeled from an econometric point of view as an instance of demand analysis, and how failure to take into account the interference of the expert may lead to biased results. And that's important for competition authorities who analyze competition between hospitals, because if they don't use the right demand-side substitution model, they risk to come to the wrong conclusions as far as what the competitive dimensions are that operate in that sector.